Imagine this: you've worked your whole life to build your success. You fought, you sacrificed, and now you stand proudly by your luxury car, a symbol of everything you've earned. But in a single moment, one man's prejudice tries to tear that away. And the worst part? He's wearing a badge. It was a bright, sunny afternoon when Halle Berry stepped out of a boutique carrying several shopping bags. She had spent her day enjoying a rare moment of peace, treating herself to small luxuries she had worked so hard to afford. Dressed stylishly and exuding confidence, Halle approached her sleek, expensive car, a car that symbolized years of sacrifice, hard work, and overcoming struggles many couldn't imagine. Placing the bags neatly by the car, she paused to search for her keys in her handbag. The street was bustling with people, cars rolling by, and life moving as usual. But then, everything changed. A police officer began approaching her, his eyes narrowed, his demeanor stiff. Halle didn't notice him at first, focused on finding her keys, but his footsteps slowed as he took in the sight of her, the luxury car, the designer bags, and the woman standing there. A black woman. In his mind, something didn't add up. Halle finally found her keys and was about to unlock the car when she noticed a shadow fall over her. Turning her head, she saw a police officer standing a few feet away, his arms crossed and his expression cold and suspicious. "Ma'am," he said curtly, his voice sharp like a blade. "Is this your vehicle?" Halle blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Excuse me," she replied, her tone polite but firm. "I asked if this is your car," the officer repeated, his gaze flickering from the car to the designer bags at her feet. "Yes, it's mine," Halle said, frowning. "Is there a problem?" The officer's eyes narrowed. "I'll need to see your identification. And the vehicle's registration. Now." Halle's heart dropped. She'd dealt with subtle prejudice before, but there was nothing subtle about this interaction. She knew what this was, she could see it in his eyes, hear it in his tone. The officer didn't believe a black woman could own a car like hers. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice rising slightly in disbelief. "I'm standing here minding my own business. What reason do you have to question me?" "I'm not going to ask again, ma'am," the officer snapped, his hand inching closer to his belt. "Papers. Now." For a brief moment, Halle felt a mix of anger and frustration building inside her. This wasn't about suspicion, this was about judgment based on the color of her skin. With a steady breath, she reached into her bag, pulling out her driver's license and the car's registration. "Here," she said, handing him the documents. "Take a good look." The officer snatched the papers, scrutinizing them closely. He frowned as his eyes flickered between Halle and the photo on her ID. The picture showed Halle with a different hairstyle, shorter and straighter. "This doesn't look like you," the officer muttered, holding up the ID for comparison. "Your hair's different." Halle stared at him in disbelief. "My hair? Are you kidding me? It's still my name, my face, my car." But the officer wasn't convinced. His suspicion only seemed to deepen. "Don't make this difficult," he said, his tone turning colder as he stepped closer. Halle felt her frustration boiling over. She had fought her way through life, overcoming hardship to get where she was. This car, this success, it was hers, earned through sweat and sacrifice. And now, because of one man's prejudice, she was being treated like a criminal on the very street she had every right to stand on. She clenched her fists, her voice steady but defiant. "This isn't right, and you know it." But the officer ignored her words, his posture becoming more aggressive. And just like that, a simple shopping trip had spiraled into something far more dangerous. Halle's patience was wearing thin as the officer continued to scrutinize her identification. His expression remained skeptical, and his silence felt heavier with each passing second. "Are you done?" Halle asked, trying to keep her voice calm despite the heat rising in her chest. "You have my ID, you have the car registration, what more do you want?" The officer ignored her, flipping the documents back and forth as if searching for some hidden lie. Finally, he looked up, his eyes sharp and accusatory. "This doesn't add up," he said flatly. "Your ID doesn't match your current look. I need to know how you got this car. Did you borrow it, or did you take it from someone?" Halle froze. The question hit her like a slap to the face. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice trembling with anger. "I own this car. It's registered in my name. Everything you're looking at proves that." "Ma'am, you need to calm down," the officer replied coolly, though his hand hovered dangerously close to his belt. "Raising your voice isn't helping your case." "My case?" Halle's eyes widened in disbelief. "What case?" "The only case here is you harassing me for no reason, because I'm a black woman with a nice car. That's what this is really about, isn't it?" The officer stepped closer, towering over her. His intimidating stance made the tension unbearable. "Watch your tone," he warned. "I'm just doing my job. There have been reports of stolen vehicles in this area." Halle let out a bitter laugh. "Stolen vehicles? You just made that up. You saw me, you saw my skin, and you assumed this car couldn't belong to me." The officer's face tightened, his pride clearly stung. "You're obstructing an investigation," he snapped, grabbing her wrist roughly. "If you don't cooperate, I'll have no choice but to detain you." Halle flinched at his touch, trying to pull her arm away. "Let go of me," she shouted. Her voice echoed down the street, catching the attention of a few distant passers-by. But the officer didn't loosen his grip. His expression was unyielding, and the force he applied grew stronger as he reached for his handcuffs. "You're resisting now. That's not a smart move." Halle's heart pounded in her chest as panic started to set in. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was being treated like a criminal. Her thoughts raced, memories flashing of all the stories she had heard, of people just like her facing injustice, of situations spiraling out of control. "Stop it," she yelled again, her voice desperate as she struggled against his hold. "You're making a mistake." But the officer didn't hear her, or didn't want to. His grip tightened, and for a moment, Halle feared the situation was about to take an even darker turn. Then, suddenly, the sharp bark of a dog pierced through the chaos. A second bark followed, louder and closer, and it was enough to make the officer freeze. Both he and Halle turned toward the sound, and there, striding toward them, was a woman in a striking purple outfit, holding two massive Rottweilers on thick leashes. The dogs' eyes were locked on the officer, their teeth bared and their growls rumbling low and deep, like a warning. The officer instinctively released Halle's wrist, taking a cautious step back as the dogs pulled forward, barking furiously. "Hey!" the woman with the dogs shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. "What do you think you're doing?" Halle staggered back slightly, clutching her wrist and staring in shock at the unexpected interruption. The officer, now visibly shaken, muttered something under his breath and took another step away from the dogs, who were still growling with teeth flashing. For the first time since this nightmare began, Halle felt a flicker of hope. Someone had seen what was happening, and they weren't afraid to step in. The chaos seemed to freeze in place as the two massive Rottweilers, their muscles tense and teeth bared, barked with a ferocity that made the officer hesitate. Each deep growl felt like a warning that couldn't be ignored. The woman holding the leashes stepped forward confidently, her presence commanding the space as if she owned it. Dressed in a striking purple outfit and exuding both poise and power, she looked at the officer with a mix of disbelief and disgust. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her tone sharp and unwavering. The officer, visibly rattled, straightened up and took another step back, his hand lingering near his belt. The dogs lunged slightly forward in response, their deep barks echoing through the street, drawing more attention from pedestrians nearby. A small crowd was starting to form, whispers of concern and curiosity floating through the air. "This doesn't concern you," the officer replied curtly, though his voice wavered. He shot a nervous glance at the Rottweilers, who were still fixated on him like sentinels, ready to pounce. "Oh, it concerns me plenty," the woman said, tightening her grip on the leashes. "I saw you grabbing this woman, manhandling her like a criminal, and I want to know why." Halle, still clutching her wrist, looked up at her unexpected savior. The relief she felt was almost overwhelming. Finally, someone had stepped in to challenge this unjust situation. Her voice was shaky but firm as she chimed in. "This officer is harassing me. I showed him my ID, my registration, everything. But apparently, a black woman can't own a nice car without being treated like a thief." The woman in purple's eyes flashed with anger as she turned back to the officer. "Is that true? Are you seriously accusing this woman of stealing her own car?" The officer stammered, his composure cracking further under the woman's steady glare and the persistent growls of the dogs. There was a discrepancy with her identification," he muttered defensively. "Discrepancy?" The woman scoffed. "Sounds like you're just making excuses. She's given you her documents, and you're the one causing a scene. Now let me give you a bit of advice." She pointed a finger directly at him, her voice cold as steel. "If you lay another hand on her, these dogs won't hesitate to remind you what protection looks like." The officer's face paled. The dogs barked again, their sharp teeth catching the sunlight as if to punctuate the woman's words. More onlookers had gathered by now, and the murmurs of disapproval were growing louder. The crowd could sense the imbalance of power and injustice, and the officer knew it. He cleared his throat, trying to regain authority. "Fine. I was just doing my job," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. With an embarrassed glance at the crowd and a final wary look at the dogs, he turned on his heel and walked briskly back toward his patrol car. Halle exhaled deeply, the tension finally beginning to lift from her body. Her heart was still pounding, but she no longer felt alone. She turned to the woman who had intervened, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." The woman smiled warmly, giving the leashes a light tug to settle the still alert dogs. "Don't mention it. I couldn't just stand by and watch that happen. Some people like him think they can get away with anything." She patted one of the Rottweilers affectionately as it leaned protectively into her leg. "And lucky for you, these two don't like bullies." Halle let out a small laugh, finally feeling a sense of comfort. She crouched slightly to pet the dogs, who wagged their tails and gave her an approving look, their earlier aggression now gone. "You two really saved me," she said softly, scratching behind their ears. The woman extended a hand to Halle, helping her back to her feet. "You're strong. You didn't need saving, you just needed someone to remind him that he couldn't treat you like that." Halle nodded, her confidence slowly returning. "Well, I won't forget this. Thank you, seriously." The woman in purple gave a wink and started walking away with her dogs, the leashes swaying in her hands. "Anytime. And if you need backup, you know where to find us." As Halle watched her disappear into the crowd, she felt a renewed sense of determination. This wasn't over. The humiliation, the injustice, it had lit a fire inside her. She wasn't just going to let this slide. Someone had to know what had happened here. And someone had to make sure it didn't happen again. Halle turned back to her car, her hands shaking less now, her jaw set with purpose. She knew one thing for certain, this story was far from finished. Halle Berry sat in front of a camera, her expression calm but her eyes filled with fire. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about every black woman who had been unjustly profiled, humiliated, or silenced. The lights of the studio glowed softly as the interviewer's voice began the segment, introducing the incident that had taken place just days earlier. Halle recounted the events with poise, sparing no detail. "I did everything they asked, showed my ID, my registration, stayed calm. But that officer didn't see a successful woman or a human being. He only saw my skin color. And because of that, he thought I couldn't possibly own that car. That's not just an insult. It's a symptom of something deeper, something broken. Her words hit hard. Footage of the confrontation, captured by a bystander, was already circulating online. People had seen the officer's aggression, the moment he grabbed her wrists, and the heroic intervention of the woman with the dogs. Public outrage erupted. Social media flooded with hashtags, calls for accountability, and discussions about racial profiling and injustice. Halle didn't stop there. She called for change, demanding better training for officers, accountability for abuse of power, and an end to profiling that targeted black individuals. This isn't just my story. It's the story of countless people who go unheard every day. I refuse to let this be swept under the rug. The media storm grew. Support poured in from fans, activists, and celebrities alike, while the officer's actions came under official investigation. The tables had turned. The same system that had tried to belittle and dehumanize her now had to answer for its failures. In the end, Halle's voice became more than a response to her own experience, it became a rallying cry. She used her platform to shed light on injustice, turning a moment of humiliation into a powerful demand for respect, equality, and accountability. As Halle closed the interview, her message was clear and unwavering: it's time we stop ignoring this. It's time for change, real change. The world was listening.